Hello, my name is Glynn Tonsor. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Agriculture Economics at Kansas State University. The purpose of this short video is to overview an updated and expanded process to calculating historical and projected cattle finishing returns for Kansas feed yards. Recently I worked on this with Kevin Dhuyvetter, a colleague here in the department at K-State as well, and we made a number of expansions and updates to the process that previously been used, and I want to raise awareness to that, make broader audience aware that this exists. We're going to be doing monthly releases to our Ag Manager website. I also want to raise awareness on the benchmarking role of this series and how break-even information that's released every month can be used to make our releases more viable, more relevant for every individual producer that might have interest in them. As you can imagine, whenever you try to calculate returns for something as complex as a feed yard, both back in time as well as projecting going forward, you need a lot of inputs. And the normal joke is economists like to make lots of assumptions, and we certainly have made lots of assumptions in this process, but fortunately for outsiders, we've outlined exactly what we did. So there is a 4-page fact sheet that gives lots of details of how Kevin and I built this updated process. But if I had to synthesize it, a lot of the animal performance information we're using comes from the Focus on Feedlots survey that's done here at Kansas State University. It gives us very unique, very timely, constantly updating information on things like average daily gain, death loss rates, placement weights, the like. So we rely upon that, and it's a very sound source. We get lots of our cattle price, feed price, interest rate types information from a host of sources. Many of those go back to USDA sources. Some go straight to the futures markets. Some go to the Federal Reserve System. And I've noted here the Livestock Marketing Information Center because we go to them to get spreadsheets that compile lots of this information. For those of you not familiar with LMIC, it compiles a lot of information from other sources, such as USDA and the futures markets, that allow folks like Kevin and I in this exercise to just get our hands dirty with our calculations rather than pulling together the raw data. And then, of course, we come up with these historical returns. So we say something about returns of placing a steer in a Kansas feed yard or a heifer in a Kansas feed yard, both back in time looking backwards, as well as trying to project what those returns might be for closeouts over the next 6 months. In addition to that, what we're doing every month in each release is providing break-even sales prices for fed cattle, purchase prices for feeder cattle, as well as our cost of gains. So again, that will provide some sensitivity around the point estimate of returns that we're releasing every month. Here's an example of our first release, which was done earlier in August. It's important to recognize these are done monthly. Our Focus on Feedlot information is updated monthly, so we correspond with that. Each month you'll see these projected values for the upcoming 6 months, just like you see here for July through December. It's important to recognize these are for closeouts as opposed to placements. That's an important distinction here. You can see the large negatives for recent closeouts. That reflects the elevated cost of gain and the fact that feeder prices were still high. Recently we've had a pullback in feeder prices, but when animals were purchased that are coming out of yards here in, say, August, September, they were purchased at these much higher levels. So that led to what we're calculating to be fairly historically high negative returns for representative yards. In addition to our calculated cost of gain, feeder price, fed price, you'll see the last 3 columns in these tables indicate what the break-even values of those 3 measures would be. This is important because we have a process in place, and again you can read details here. The website is noted on this slide of how we calculate cost of gain, how we calculate fed prices going forward, and so forth, and that may not match any one operation. If you have a different feeding regime in place such that you're regularly different than the cost of gain we're projecting here, you can make that comparison over time, and you can see how your estimates fall in between what we're projecting and what we're showing as the break-even to, again, try to figure out what that means for the net return information you have. At the end of the day, and the reason I have this at the bottom of the slide, what I think we'd like this type of information to be used for is as a barometer of trends and profitability. I don't think it's precise to the 3rd decimal point by any means. I don't think it matches any one feed yard perfectly, but hopefully it represents the industry and it picks up on trends over time. And again, it gives a barometer of things that are going on in the industry, and that's the main purpose of it. Another thing you'll see each month when we post this to our website and each monthly update is we'll add another month to our historical series. So this chart right here goes back to, as you can see, January 2002 and shows the notable variability that we're all aware of exists in feedlot returns here in Kansas. The good times and the bad times show up very quickly on this chart, and you'll see the little blue line to the far right where the next 6 months are shown. So it gives some context on how projections on closeouts over the next 6 months compare to recent history or longer history of using the same exercise. This was purposely a short presentation just to call your attention to an updated feedlot series we have on our Ag Manager website. Those of you interested in details, again, I encourage you to go to the dedicated fact sheet that Kevin Dhuyvetter and I pulled together that gives lots of details on how we're doing this.